Gladiator, movie versus history. The movie Gladiator is Ridley Scott's historical epic that catapulted Russell Crowe to global stardom and captivated millions of viewers worldwide. Rightfully considered a classic of cinema, the film showcases brilliant direction, powerful performances, and exceptional production design that heightens the story's epic feel. However, the screenplay stands on shaky historical ground and often presents a version of history that scholars would consider as distant from the truth as the top row of the Colosseum. So sit back, as today we break down the historical inaccuracies and deviations from reality found in Gladiator. The protagonist of the film Gladiator is named Maximus Decimus Meridius, though he is usually referred to simply as Maximus. For Roman men, it was customary to have at least two names, a praenomen given name and a nomen family name, the latter often ending in ius. Some also had a third name, or cognomen, a sort of nickname that originally highlighted a personal trait. In everyday speech, Romans rarely used their given names, instead preferring their family or cognomen, which were more distinctive. There were only around 18 praenomina in common use, and official documents or inscriptions often abbreviated them. For example, the full name of Commodus was Lucius Aurelius Commodus, and he was referred to as Commodus, his cognomen. Similarly, Gaius Julius Caesar was mostly called Caesar, not Gaius. Based on this, Maximus Decimus Meridius would likely have been called Meridius or Decimus, not Maximus. Some Romans even adopted a fourth name to mark their achievements, such as Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus, who added Africanus after his victory over Hannibal at the Battle of Zama. Lucilla, the daughter of Emperor Marcus Aurelius, is portrayed in Gladiator as a noble and educated woman deeply concerned with the fate of Rome. One of the central tensions in the film is her complicated and uncomfortable relationship with her power-hungry brother Commodus, which she manages carefully to protect her son Lucius. In reality, there's no evidence that Commodus harbored any erotic feelings toward Lucilla. However, it is true that she was disturbed by his behavior and took part in a poorly executed plot to assassinate him. Unlike the movie, her story didn't end happily. Commodus had Lucilla and her daughter Lucilla Plautia exiled to the island of Capri, and later that year, he sent a centurion to execute them. Lucilla did have a son named Lucius Verus, like in the film, but he had already died by the time these events took place. In 161 AD, Marcus Aurelius arranged a marriage for his then 12-year-old daughter Lucilla to 30-year-old Lucius Verus. They had 3 children, Aurelia Lucilla, Lucilla Plautia, and Lucius Verus, though only Lucilla Plautia survived childhood. After Lucilla's husband, Lucius Verus, died, Marcus Aurelius arranged another marriage for his daughter Lucilla to Tiberius Claudius Pompeianus, who was also nearly twice her age. They had a son together, and both Pompeianus and their child were spared by Commodus because they weren't involved in the assassination attempt. In the movie Gladiator, Marcus Aurelius, after a victorious campaign against Germanic tribes, tells General Maximus that his own son Commodus is unfit to rule and offers Maximus the chance to become a regent and restore the Roman Republic. When Commodus learns of this, he murders his father and declares himself emperor. Maximus refuses to pledge loyalty to Commodus and is ordered to be executed by the Praetorian Guard. Historically, Marcus Aurelius couldn't have disinherited Commodus even if he wanted to. His son had already been co-emperor with him for 3 years at that point. Furthermore, Commodus did not murder his father. Marcus Aurelius died during a military campaign against the Germanic tribes, either in Vindobona, modern-day Vienna, or near Sirmium, and sources point to illness or possibly poisoning as the cause of death. There's no mention of suffocation by his son. After Marcus Aurelius's death, Commodus became sole ruler at the age of 18. He arranged his father's funeral, made peace with the Germans, and returned to Rome, where he celebrated a triumph. In the film Gladiator, Commodus is portrayed as an emotionally damaged villain, desperate for public adoration. While the film paints his actions as despicable, the real Commodus was even worse: cruel, indulgent, and increasingly deranged. Unlike his father, who was seen as wise and philosophical, Commodus had little interest in governance, preferring to delegate power to advisors, whom he often had executed if they lost his favor. With no responsibilities and immense wealth, Commodus became obsessed with gladiatorial games, participating in them himself. He slaughtered both animals and humans for sport, once killing 5 hippos and 2 elephants in 2 days, or a rhinoceros and giraffe on another occasion. He was also said to have speared 100 bears from the safety of a balcony. In one case, he allegedly gathered a large number of legless men, dressed them up as snakes, and gave them mushrooms to throw at him instead of stones. Commodus then pretended they were giants and killed them. He was more careful with real gladiators and didn't kill any of them. At most, he would cut off an ear or a nose. The gladiators, of course, always let him win. Commodus eventually saw himself as the reincarnation of Hercules and spent vast amounts of money to spread this image. He replaced the head of a 30-meter statue of the Emperor Nero with his own likeness and placed a bronze lion at its feet to symbolize his Herculean identity. He also renamed the months of the year after himself. August became Commodus, October became Hercules, and so on. After a major fire in Rome in 191 AD, he even renamed the city the Colony of Commodus. While the movie Gladiator depicts Commodus as a sleazy villain who is incest-obsessed like Jaime Lannister from the series Game of Thrones, the real Commodus was actually a strikingly handsome young man with curly blonde hair and an intense sexual appetite. Allegedly, he had a sculpted physique and was so obsessed with his own appearance that he commissioned numerous statues portraying himself, as we've mentioned before, as Hercules, wearing a lion's skin and wielding a club, believing himself to be the demigod's reincarnation. He reportedly had hundreds of lovers and concubines who cared for his every need. One of his most famous and favored mistresses, who would eventually seal his fate, was Marcia. In the film, Commodus challenges Maximus to a duel and stabs him beforehand to gain an unfair advantage. Despite the injury, Maximus defeats and kills Commodus in the Colosseum, watched silently by the Praetorians who refused to help their emperor. Reality was far less cinematic. Before becoming Commodus's mistress, Marcia had been involved with his cousin and was persuaded by Commodus's sister Lucilla to join an assassination plot as early as 182 AD. Although the conspiracy was discovered and Lucilla was executed, Marcia escaped punishment and, after the death of Commodus's wife, became his lover. Later, during New Year's celebrations, Commodus announced his plan to parade into the city, not from the palace as tradition dictated, but from the gladiators' barracks, escorted by fighters. Marcia advised him against it, warning that it would disgrace the Roman Empire. Commodus discussed his idea with several others, who also tried to dissuade him. Enraged, the emperor decided to write down everyone who disagreed with him, including Marcia, on a list of people to be executed the following morning, along with several prominent senators. When Marcia accidentally saw her own name on the list, she erupted in anger and decided to take action. She contacted the Praetorian prefect Quintus Aemilius Latus and Commodus's servant Eclectus, both disillusioned with the emperor, and persuaded them to join her in a plot. She poisoned his wine after his bath, and though Commodus grew ill and began vomiting, the conspirators feared he might survive. They summoned his personal wrestling trainer and sparring partner, Narcissus, and paid him handsomely to strangle the emperor. Thus, Commodus met his unglamorous end, not on the golden sand of the Colosseum, but vomit-covered and strangled in his bedroom. Many characters in the movie Gladiator are loosely based on real historical figures, but Maximus Decimus Meridius is not one of them. He is entirely fictional and does not appear in any historical records. However, the filmmakers drew inspiration from several real people. Chief among them was Marcus Nonius Macrinus, a general and consul who served Marcus Aurelius between 161 and 180 AD, and was one of his close advisors. Elements were also borrowed from Narcissus, Commodus's real-life trainer and eventual assassin, and from Tiberius Claudius Pompeianus, a general of humble Syrian origins who married Marcus Aurelius's daughter Lucilla. Some historians see parallels between Maximus and Decimus Clodius Albinus, a warrior and consul who later became a usurper of the empire. Others compare him to Cincinnatus, a Roman farmer from the 5th century BC. Spiritually and narratively, however, Maximus most resembles Spartacus, the Thracian slave and gladiator who led a massive uprising against the Roman Republic. At the end of the movie, Gladiator, the dying Maximus fulfills Marcus Aurelius's wish by killing Commodus and symbolically ending the corrupt empire, restoring the Roman Republic. Historically, nothing of the sort happened. The Roman Republic officially ended in 27 BC, when Octavian Augustus, grandnephew and adoptive son of Julius Caesar, declared himself the first emperor. The imperial system was born out of Julius Caesar's influence. His name Caesar later became synonymous with ruler. There is no evidence that any Roman emperor or the Senate seriously wished to return to the old republican system, nor that any ruling elite sought to dismantle the empire. Those who became emperors fully embraced the imperial model. The traditional date for the fall of the Western Roman Empire is 476 AD, when the Germanic general Odoacer deposed the young emperor Romulus Augustulus. In the film Gladiator, Marcus Aurelius is portrayed as an enlightened philosopher king who bans gladiatorial games in Rome, pushing them out to the provinces. Commodus later reinstates them. Historically, Marcus Aurelius did indeed oppose the excessive expansion of gladiator shows, but he never banned them. Ironically, during his reign, games were held on 135 days each year, more than 1 out of every 3 days. Still, he did try to curb the bloodshed. He insisted that gladiators fight with blunt weapons in front of him, preferring athletic competition over deadly combat. He also passed a law requiring tightrope dancers to have safety nets to reduce injury risk. When the empire faced barbarian invasions, Marcus even recruited gladiators as soldiers. This drew complaints from citizens, who jokingly said that he'd replaced their entertainment with philosophy lessons. As the cost of hosting games soared, especially in the provinces, where local officials had to cover the expenses, the emperor eventually decreed that criminals could be sold to the arenas as gladiators. Maximus Decimus Meridius is nicknamed the Spaniard in the movie Gladiator due to his origin. While the Iberian Peninsula was indeed under Roman rule at the time, a country named Spain didn't exist. In the Roman era, the entire peninsula and its provinces were collectively known as Hispania. The region served as a breadbasket for the Roman market, exporting gold, wool, olive oil, and wine. Rome held control over the peninsula for more than 6 centuries. The cultures of the pre-Roman populations were gradually Romanized, and local leaders were integrated into the Roman aristocracy. What was later called Spain, or the Spanish Empire, only began to form in the 15th century. Therefore, Maximus should technically be referred to as a Hispanian, not a Spaniard. In an emotional scene where soldiers arrive to burn Maximus's home and kill his family, we see his young son running and shouting, "Mama! I soldati! Papa! Mom! The soldiers! Dad!" in Italian. While many languages were spoken across the Roman Empire, Italian was not one of them, as it didn't exist yet. Giorgio Cantarini, the actor who played Maximus's son, was Italian, and his native speech simply sounded foreign enough to the filmmakers that they kept the line in. However, Maximus's son should have spoken in some local Latin dialect. Although the iconic Roman arena is frequently referred to as the Colosseum in the movie Gladiator, and we've done the same here for simplicity, in ancient times it was officially known as the Amphitheatrum Flavium, the Flavian Amphitheatre. Historians believe the name Colosseum originated from the colossal statue of Emperor Nero that stood nearby. The term began to be commonly used around the year 1000 AD, long after the events depicted in the film. While the Roman Empire did indeed wage protracted wars against Germanic tribes, and the film showcases a grand and visually impressive forest battle based on that reality, some elements of that battle are inaccurate, especially the siege weapons. Although catapults and ballistae were in use at the time, they were intended for sieging cities and fortresses, not for open field engagements with mobile, unfortified tribal groups. Still, they sure looked impressive on screen. No argument there. Despite popular belief and the portrayal in the film Gladiator, gladiators didn't die in combat as frequently as we might think. They were valuable assets, not expendable pawns. Their training was expensive and time-consuming. On average, only 1 in 5 matches ended in death. The exception, of course, were condemned criminals who were expected, and often required, to die in the arena. There is also debate over the famous thumb gesture depicted in the film as a thumb up for life and thumb down for death. Some sources suggest that a thumb up might actually have meant to kill, as in stab in the throat, while thumb down signified sparing the fighter and sheathing the sword. Other theories claim the thumb wasn't used at all, and the signal for death was a slashing motion across the neck. There is no definitive evidence for the thumb gesture we associate with Roman games today. The modern idea was popularized by Jean-Léon Gérôme's painting Police Verso, which shows the crowd giving thumbs down to demand a gladiator's death. In the film, men and women sit side by side in the Colosseum, or the Amphitheatrum Flavium. In reality, seating was strictly segregated according to Roman social hierarchy. Women, the poor and slaves were relegated to the uppermost gallery, far from the arena floor, while senators and aristocrats sat closest to the action. And that concludes our list of inaccuracies in the movie Gladiator. Were you surprised by any of them? Which one stood out the most? Do you know of any other historical liberties the film may have taken? Let us know in the comments, and thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed to our channel.